Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm very excited that you could join us today. We haven't met in a while. So this is the Notebooks Now, we're calling it the all group update. We invited all of you who are part of the workshops, at the workshop and the working groups. And we did also invite some people that had expressed interest at AGU 23. To be a part of the pilot. We invited them along, so there may be a few of you here who are new. So if you are, welcome, and thanks for joining us. I'm gonna share my screen with our slides and agenda. Okay, so I'm gonna get right into it. Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Sidora. I'm Senior Program Manager of Publications and Open Science at American Geophysical Union, and I am one of the members of the Notebooks Now team. So what we're going to do today is go through a quick walkthrough of our agenda. So we'll do a welcome and acknowledgements portion. I'll give you a brief history and project motivations. I know a lot of you already know it, but they're just for the benefit of people who are joining who are new or maybe have kind of not been actively following along with the project, just so that we're level set of where we are. And then Rowan from CurveNote is going to give us a showcase demonstration of what we've been working on last year. We'll talk about next steps, and then finally we'll have an open mic discussion section. So before I begin, is there any comments anyone wants to make, or any questions? Okay. And please, if you want me to pause as I'm sharing my screen, raise your hand. I'll try to monitor chat, but I don't always see it. But if you use the raise hand feature, I'll see that, and I can stop if you have a question or a comment. So, all right, let's get into this. So first, I wanted to start off with acknowledgements. A big thank you to really everyone. So the steering committee, who was formed in 2022 when this project kicked off, as well as the working groups. So those working group chairs are all listed here. They worked very hard through the working group cycle last year. And everyone who participated, who attended the workshop, participated in the working groups, and who have volunteered your time and expertise to help further this project's success. Thank you. We couldn't have gotten to where we are without all of the hard work and contributions from you all. A couple people I'd like to call out and thank Josh, Elizabeth, and Sonali from the Sloan Foundation. Sloan funded the grant that helped drive this work forward. I want to acknowledge Chris Erdman for helping us launch Notebooks Now and connecting us with many of you who are in the working groups. Laura Lyon provided crucial project support early in the project. Rowan, Steve, Mike from CurveNote. We have authors Kayla and Lynn and their co-authors, and you'll see in the demonstration, they helped us with the demo by using their published manuscripts that had been published in Earth and Space Science. Brooks Hansen for his continued support of this project. Our Wiley and eJournal Press team, Jen, Al, Jamie, Emily, and Joel, Posit, JJ, and Charles, and finally, and I have to move this little bar out of the way, everyone on the AGU staff who has helped get us where we are to this point. Matt, Mia, Aaron, Nick, Susan, Shelley, Christina, and previously Chris, Brooks, Laura, and Jeanette. Thank you for indulging me while I was going through that. So I want to begin by level setting of what a current publication is. So this is a current Earth and Space Science publication. one of our journals. On the left is HTML output. On the right is PDF. It's great. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. It's the text of the article. It's the figures. But that's it. It's flat. It doesn't have any interactivity or functionality. So as we all know, computational notebooks is more than that. So computational notebooks allow for the code, data, graphics, and narrative to be combined into a single document. But you get that added functionality, for example, animations, interactive graphics, and more that's possible. And that improves transparency, and that can accelerate research by providing the direct access to this data, so people can replicate, people can see what went into the results, clarifying methods, their approach, and more. So we know that, and we know that the motivation for researchers to use notebooks is that, one, it does demonstrate reproducibility, where a reader can execute the author's notebook against the researcher's data, or some subset of it. It does enable effective reuse. So having that data right there makes it possible for someone to build upon that and explore it. And those exploratory figures, and Rowan in his demo will show you what has been built into the platform with, so it's taking those static figures and making it much more interactive with widgets that allow you to explore data sets and results. And so why publish notebooks? Well, as I said previously, they're already being widely used by researchers across disciplines. They integrate that text, data, and code all in one package. Their structured format, their open source code, their integration with open infrastructure, and growing tools and resources allow increased functionality for readers and further crowdsourced innovation. And notebooks allow for greatly increased transparency and reproducibility, especially important as we're expanding open science practices. I also want to touch on the history of notebooks at AGU. So Dr. Peter Fox was crucial in getting AGU on the pathway to publishing notebooks. In fact, so the authors that I had mentioned earlier, Kayla and Lynn, Peter had recruited them to submit articles to Earth and Space Science back in 2020. And those went through a traditional publication pipeline, but did publish. They published as article first, with a link out to the notebook second. So not quite what was envisioned, what Peter had envisioned, but he knew that we had to start somewhere. And so I'm actually really excited that we were able to engage with Kayla and Lynn for the first phase of this pilot, and you'll see the results of that in a little bit. So just to go over, if you all remember the Notebooks Now timeline, so we had the hybrid workshop in November of 2022, where over 70 people joined us both in person at AGU headquarters and online, where we identified the challenges and the opportunities of creating this publication workflow. After that, the working groups formed during the workshop, started doing the actual work of trying to provide answers to those questions or trying to solve the problems that were raised. And that work commenced in January 2023 through June, which led us up to the phase one of our pilot, which I'll talk about in a couple of slides from now. And that was from July through December. And part of that was the showcase of showing what is possible that this workflow can work. And we are currently on the phase two of the pilot, and I'll give you more details after Rowan's demonstration. So as you recall from our working groups and the workshop, our approach was to break the workflow into the individual portions. So pre-submission is what an author is thinking, even before they're thinking they're going to submit a paper, that very beginning. Metadata, what types of things need to be collected in addition to what is already collected by a traditional publication. Editorial and peer review looks at everything that happens from the minute it's submitted, that it goes in front of an editor, how staff interact with it, how it's peer reviewed. Production and post-production goes into everything that happens after acceptance. And content consumer, as you may recall, we went into the workshop with 4 working groups. We came out with 5, the 5th being content consumer. And that we identified at the workshop that there's a need for how that end user interacts with a notebook, what instructions are needed, what kind of guidance is needed so that they can do that. And these are just, I cherry picked a few of the things, the questions that the working groups identified and worked on for this slide, but there were many others that went into the consideration of building this workflow, building the templates, creating the guidance that would be needed for somebody to submit a notebook. And so that leads us up to phase 1 of the pilot. So the goal of phase 1 was taking all of those group recommendations and transforming them into a proof of concept workflow that demonstrates all the capabilities, the functionality, the advantages of a computational notebooks through submission, peer review, and publication as the primary element. So not as supporting information, not as a link out to a Binder Hub instance. So it is the publication of the article. And so here I list some of the accomplishments, or many of the accomplishments from phase 1. We refined submission, the groups refined submission templates and continued standardization of the JATS Mecha for notebooks. Deployed a documentation website for tool-specific submission instructions for the AGU template. Developed a CurveNote-based reading and hosting platform integrated into Binder Hub for use during peer review. Developed integration of the submission system to the existing peer review system, which is called JEMS. Ensured accurate transfer of final Mecha files, including optimized JATS to Wiley. And finally, last, but what I was most excited about was that we showcased these efforts at AGU 23 through an oral session, a town hall, at the Open Science Pavilion, and we gathered interest for participation in phase 2 of the pilot. I think, okay, so that's where I'm gonna stop sharing. And I'm gonna turn it over to Rowan, but before I do, any questions so far? All right, Rowan, take it away.
Fantastic. I'm incredibly excited to show you some of the work that we've completed for the Notebooks Now showcase that we demonstrated at AGU 23. I am Rowan Cockett. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of CurveNote, where we build modern publishing infrastructure for computational research. And so, as I'm sure everybody on the call knows today, there's just an explosion of growth in data and code in scientific research that is changing and fundamentally changing research practices. And our traditional scientific publishing infrastructure has not caught up. And so this is sort of a caricature of science communication today, a 2-column PDF that you're looking at on a phone with data in a table that's on its side that you can't copy. And really, this format isn't supporting data, it's not supporting interactivity, and it doesn't support computation. And really, it's not built for the way that researchers are creating and consuming articles today. Computational notebooks give us a chance to redesign science communication to better match how researchers work and use the capabilities of notebooks to enhance reproducibility, interactivity, and the overall reading experience. What if we could explore results? So instead of having a single static figure, we can drag over data sets and see all of the different parts and interrogate it. What if we could dive into footnotes and references with videos and just keep on going until we find the methods, the code, the data? What if we could explore models directly where we're reading, seeing the assumptions of those models, and interrogating and changing parameters and seeing the results? What if we could push a button and spin up a computational environment in the cloud to reproduce and visualize the results, to run new physics simulations with new data and be able to see those directly in the article reading experience? What this requires is the computational instructions and the data behind the research that we publish today, so that you can dive into the source of a figure and see all of the data, all of the instructions, all of the code and the environments that it's run in. And this is really improving the scientific record in a fundamental way and supporting the process of science and living up to the ethos of standing on the shoulders of giants and being able to build upon other people's ideas and iterate and get to the next idea a little bit faster. At the AGU 23 town hall, an early career researcher stood up and stated that this sort of publishing workflow could save them potentially years of time because they have access to more of the science, more of the methods, more of the computation, and more of the data. And so these are some of the ideas that we explored throughout the Notebooks Now project and pilot, and having a better reading experience, taking interactivity all the way through articles, and really tying together the computation data and reproducible steps that are captured in notebooks. And today, I'm not going to go through all of the pieces that we did in each part of this. There was just a ton of work that went on in each process here. But instead, I'm going to focus on the consumption piece and sort of showcase some of the ways that articles and the reading experience can change. And so that was through the Notebooks Now showcase that we put together for December. And this was really demonstrating two of those papers that Brian was talking about. One by Kayla et al. And her co-authors, and then one by Lynn and Mark, who I believe are on the call today. So those two articles were reimagined for this Notebook Now showcase. The first article, Kayla's, was on reproducing and comparing thermodynamic models for volatile solubility in silicate melts. And here we have the notebook rendered as an article. And so there's a rich reading experience around it. The notebook is entirely machine readable. There's all sorts of rich metadata that was added based on the working group recommendations to this, and really providing a rich and beautiful reading experience. We can look at the paper and, again, thinking about the reading experience, you can cross-reference the sections. So in this case, section 3 is linking to table 2, which is part of a table and a data file that is part of a notebook. And then you can directly get all the way to the data set at the end of the day. So you're going from the paper to the notebook, seeing the code and downloading the data all in a few seconds. We can bring other metadata in, like abbreviations in context, where SFVF, in this case, doesn't mean a whole lot on its own. But when you hover over it and see San Francisco volcanic field, you get a better idea of what the author is trying to convey. And the notebook content and code are directly attached. And so when you're hovering over a figure, you can see the code that directly created it and go to the source of that document. And so these are some of the pieces that we were thinking about throughout sort of reimagining that reading experience, is these deep dive links and sort of intimately linking the reading experience, the notebook, and the data and the computation, and having those links to data sets directly available. A lot of attention to many of the smaller details, not just in traditional metadata, but expanding the capabilities of a reading experience to support new reading experiences, like things like abbreviations, and things that should be table stakes in terms of being able to copy code, seeing things on your phone, and having things in dark mode. So these are some of the ideas that we brought to life in the showcase. In Kayla's article, they reproduced 7 models from the literature and compared them. And that is just a tremendously valuable resource to people who are trying to build upon that work. And all of these calculations were in supporting documents that were at the bottom of the article in a zip file download that you probably didn't see. And in the KervNote reading experience, you can see all of these documents just by clicking a link on the side, seeing the supporting documents, and those have the same rich typesetting and interactive reading experience as the rest of the article. And again, those can be fully linked together. One of the figures that we demonstrated, or that Kayla and her authors were working on, demonstrated that actually each sample and each method of those 7 methodologies gave actually different results. And that was something that usually wasn't done by researchers in the space. And they couldn't actually show those differences in a static PDF image. And so they instead showed the average, the min, and the max. But when we have computation and interactivity available, we can make these figures interactive to actually explore the results and the data, to click on each one of these and showcase how the models, samples, and all of those work together, and put that in the reader's control. One of the other showcase articles by Lynn and Mark presented a theoretical model to understand isotope composition in salts. And much of the paper was discussing the differences in model parameters. And in the KervNote reading experience, you can click a link and have a dedicated Binder Hub environment that's built for AGU that you can execute code inside of, launch an interactive Jupyter environment, and then actually explore some of the models. And so we're putting slider bars on those parameters that the researchers were talking about, that is really communicating a richer understanding and sort of a way to explore and understand these results in a much different and richer way. And so those were, again, some of those pieces that we were trying to showcase with the Notebooks Now pilot, was all of the supporting research and documents. Clicking and launching a Jupyter environment that is hosted by AGU, and actually archiving those containers. And that is a full Jupyter environment, so that can support some interactive research or extension of the results that are shown, and then bringing those interactive figures directly into the reading experience. And we can still have PDFs. And so out of this, we're creating print-ready and publication-ready PDF documents, as well as a lot of the conversations behind the scenes, especially with the POSIT and pre-submission group, was talking about the metadata that we're supporting throughout this process with JATs and Meca files, and really understanding what it means to bring computation into these XML formats that were designed without those things in mind. And one sort of piece that we're starting to build out for phase 2 of the pilot is, because you have a lot more information right at the start of when you're submitting a document as a notebook, you can change the submission system quite substantially. And so we can bring a lot of those editorial checks forward in the process, where you can check things like reproducibility in figures and cross-linking, and provide rich examples to the author where they can make improvements and react to some of that feedback. And this will be through a drag and drop experience, either through a GitHub repository or uploading a zip file, and then seeing a typeset draft directly, and again, iterating through that so that you can actually pass these automated checks. And one of the other ethos that is really exciting throughout this project is that we want to be able to extend these sorts of ideas to many different scientific fields. And so one of the clients that KervNote is working with is the Microscopy Society of America. And as you can imagine, in the same way that geospatial data is quite difficult to represent in a static PDF document with sections and zoomed in portions, that's exactly the same with microscopy data. And some of these same ideas can be brought to life in totally different scientific disciplines. And so that is quite exciting. And again, the ways of bringing together through AGU and some of the work that CurveNote has done, these open source tools and community driven tools, and giving them the platform that AGU can give it. And so I'm incredibly excited for the next phase of this Notebooks Now pilot, where we're starting to actually do new research. And so I will turn that back to Brian.
Thanks, Rowan. Every time I see that demo walkthrough, I get incredibly excited. I could watch that all day. So thank you. I do want to recognize that I see that there are questions in the chat. If it's okay, we'll go through the next phase and those slides. And I did leave agenda time for open discussion and open mic. So if that's okay, let me get my slides back up here. Okay. So now we're talking next steps. So what we are internally calling L1 was getting the showcase site built, working with the authors of those previously published Jupyter Notebook manuscripts to show what is possible in a publication in this format. But what we want to do now is we want to get live submissions, new submissions that we can test, we can put through the workflow, and we have a phase plan for doing that to mitigate some of the unreadiness. I don't know if authors today would have a completely ready notebook to submit. This will also allow us to test out internal systems, get staff up to speed. So I'm going to walk through what each of these next phases looks like, starting with L2. So L2 is what we're calling concierge and peer review. So the timeline for this is February through June of 2024. And so what we're doing, Graciela, who is the editor-in-chief of Earth and Space Science, has been involved in this project from nearly the beginning. She's very excited about this. She recognizes, just as Peter did, the power of notebooks and what they can do, and she wants to be involved in getting notebooks published in the journal Earth and Space Science. So Graciela is going to help us identify articles through pre-submission assessment. So we did, for those of you who are on from the interest that you've shown at AGU 23, we did receive over 50 names of people who are interested in participating in this phase of the pilot. So Graciela is going to help us assess because above all, besides having something that can work in a notebook format, it also has to meet the scope and the requirements for publication in Earth and Space Science. So once Graciela helps us identify, we'll reach out to the identified potential authors and to help them prepare a computational notebook submission. That's where CurveNote is going to be involved, and that's where the concierge comes in to this, where they're going to help the authors. And this is where I said, we do have templates, and those templates will come in phase 3, L3. But for this part, this is CurveNote is going to help authors who have notebooks, but that might need a little bit of help to get into the best format, to go through the process, to go in front of the editor and peer reviewers, and find the best way to highlight their research findings in this format. GEMS, which is our internal submission manuscript system, that process, that submission is initiated by CurveNote through the preparation of that notebook, and then it goes through behind the scenes, and then the authors will complete it. Just as if you've ever submitted to an AGU journal before, when you start a submission and you can go back to it, it kind of picks up with the metadata that's imported from CurveNote and you'll have to add some necessary metadata that's not collected on the front end. And then AGU staff and editors are involved in this step in shepherding through peer review. And this is where also that staff education, the editor education of what it takes to handle this. And it's a learning cycle for everybody to see what's involved. And because of this, we are limiting this to 3 to 6 invited submissions. And we hope that that will be a good foundation for showcasing something that's live, that's a new submission going through the system. And in the teal box I have, and you'll see this on the next 2 slides also, I just have a highlight of working group engagement and participation. So beyond, you know, getting updates from what we're doing, this is where there's going to be a chance for or a request for further engagement. So we'll need, the notebooks will need peer reviewers. So the editors, of course, work to identify peer reviewers that are appropriate for the submission, but that pool may come from people in these groups who have been are very knowledgeable about notebooks, and you know, and we haven't exactly determined if that looks like what that looks like, if it's someone who peer reviews just the notebook components, and then we have other peer reviewers who look at the science, but that's something that we'll be working through during phase L2, as well as feedback on the instructions, the author guidelines, the reviewer guidelines, things like that, and helping us spread the word. So I know that we're very excited about this project, and it's easy to live in that bubble of, well, then everyone must be. But I think as we proceed with this pilot, we want to definitely drum up the excitement, the interest, and you all can definitely help us do that. So after L2, phase L3, what that's going to look like, what we're calling it, is a notebook template submission. So as that name suggests, that is a submission from the templates that have been created, the AGU templates for creating a notebook from scratch. And the timeline for this one is April, September. I mean, all of these timelines are a little bit fluid, and it will, a lot of this will depend on the success of the L2 pilot, and then when we move on to L4, it'll depend on the success of L3. But our aim for this one is that submissions are mostly automated, and the CurveNote is more there as to guide, but not necessarily the concierge that's provided in L2. The CurveNote submission system is live and further integrated within AGU ecosystem. Integrate the CurveNote, the eJournal Press, which is our GEM, our peer review submission vendor, Wiley, who is our publisher for traditional articles, and get these systems integrated from submission to publication, and working through that timeline for these submissions. And the idea is that the authors submit on the CurveNote platform directly, and then behind the scenes, that CurveNote transfer happens to our AGU's GEMS, and it's more seamless behind the scenes. And again, the goal for this phase is 3 to 6 additional submissions. So all told, for these 2 phases of this pilot, looking at 6 to 12 submissions. So keeping the scale small so that we can control and mitigate anything that comes up, and as well as learn about what's going to take both from, you know, author resources, staff resources, all those things that will go into accounting for being able to properly handle a submission. And then L4 is the scale out, so general availability within ESS. So the timeline I have on this is late 2024, but the exact timeline will be determined as we assess the L2 and L3 phases of the pilot progress and the readiness to expand it to open submissions in the journal. So we'll definitely keep everyone updated on that progress as we go through L2 and L3. And this phase, as the name implies, is notebook submissions are available to all. There's no editor-in-chief pre-assessment. There's it's just like you decide to submit and you choose to submit to an AGU journal. This will be a manuscript type that you can submit and get it into peer review or get it in front of an editor. And at this time we will explore launching in other AGU journals, but also I say other journals here because this is something that we're working on this workflow, but we're looking to also show others. I know there's interest with other societies, other publishers. Shelley, you have your hand raised.
I do. There's a lot of interest in chat, and I just wanted to jump in very quickly for a general comment that what CurveNote's been working with us with AGU on is not a boutique solution. It is not just for AGU's pipeline. It actually is being designed for any pipeline. That doesn't mean it's like a widget you install. There is some integration that's going to be required, but it is quite minimal. And that's one of the reasons we are over the moon excited, because very, very doable. So there's a lot of other technical questions that are coming in. I will navigate them as best we can. So go ahead, Brian.
Great, thank you, Shelley. Yeah, so as I said, and I think I caught some of the chat. So this is something that while AGU is behind this effort, and we're rolling this out in an AGU journal. This is something that we want to make available to all publishers across all fields. So this is not something we're looking to keep within an internal process. And so to do that, promote adoption by other publishers. Go to conferences and say, hey, this is what we did. This is what you can do. What I would like to do is create a wealth of resources that you all can use, even if it's talking points or a one-pager of what the project did and what it's looking to do. Help spread that word so that others who are interested can learn what they need to do to roll this out. So I have two more slides, or one more slide, I think, before we can then open it up to discussion and open mic. So just a couple of communications updates. So one, and let me drop this link in chat. One second, group chat, there it is. Okay, so I do list our Notebooks Now project page. This is where we will post project updates. As many of you are aware, we have migrated the Slack, the Notebooks Now Slack, to the AGU main Slack. That was mainly a financial decision, because since we are moving beyond the current funding for the grant, this was something that AGU's, and I should say also AGU is working to kind of bring the use of Slack under a main umbrella. So this was completed on Monday. If you did not get the link to join the AGU main Slack, please let me know. I'm working with Jeremy, our director in digital, who is helping me with the migration. He's actually going to show me there's an extra step. So with the Notebooks Now Slack and all Slacks that I had used before, it was simply sharing a link for you to join the Slack, and then you could join sub-channels within the channel. So the way that the AGU main is set up is everyone who is a part of Notebooks Now is a part of Notebooks Now under the AGU main Slack, and only the people who are a part of Notebooks Now can see the Notebooks Now channels. that does introduce an extra step that I need to learn from Jeremy on how to get people added. So if for whatever reason you did not get the migration over, or if there's someone here that's new that wants to join, reach out to me and I'll send out more information on that as well. And just the note on the communications updates, the form that I dropped into the chat, it's been a couple years since I know the email list largely that I'm working on was collected in 2022. I know that, people move institutions, update email addresses. So that form just has fields that are not mandatory, but fields to fill out with your name, if you have an updated email address so that we can update our communication list. And there's, I did include two fields for indicating your interest in joining the Slack channels there. And you can indicate which working group channels you'd like to join other than just the general conversation in Slack. And I think that is my last slide.
I can jump in and start to facilitate some of our questions.
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you,
Get
Sean.
ready. Here, they're coming your direction. So Rowan, you've already answered, but could you talk to why this works for different notebook types? What are the notebook types? And thread that for us.
There's two submission formats that we are working on. And so this is what the pre-submission working group worked on. And CurveNote was working very closely with Posit on this, which is the steward of the Quarto format. And so the two submission formats are Quarto markup language and MIST Markdown. And MIST Markdown is a community-based project that's built behind JupyterBook and has a lot of ties to the Jupyter ecosystem.
Fantastic. And could you also, for the folks that are on here who are publishers, connect the dots with Meka?
So Meka is an ISO standard that is it's called Manuscript Exchange Common Approach. And so this is a standard, I believe, that eJournal Press was involved at least in starting. And that is a XML plus zip file plus JATS approach to transferring data files between publishers. And so that includes all of the notebook content. It has a manifest file that looks into the content directories, and then that can be migrated between systems such that authors don't have to add additional metadata or enter it into different formats. And that's something that in the pre-submission and metadata groups, all of us were working together on ensuring that those standards lived up to the NISO standard, and both MIST Markdown and Quarto are producing the exact same JATS, or functionally the same JATS and Meka files coming out of it.
So you're here to hear first, folks. We finally have computational notebooks aligned with the standards of both their world, the combination of computational notebooks, and the publishing world. So that is just what you heard. And that would be February 28th, 2024. So just remember that when you're quoting this in the next 20 years, it was today. All right. So Melissa points out the fact that there's a number of she uses the word archaic, we'll just say legacy publishing systems. And we're working with eJournal Press, but how will this work potentially, although, because we haven't yet talked to them, equate to, what is it, Editorial Manager and ScholarOne and the other major intake systems? I think I should answer it. We haven't talked to them yet, but the way that Rowan has the CurveNote process designed, it's meant to be an easy integration. Fair enough,
Yeah.
Rowan?
Yeah, that's cool. I was trying to remember though, because EJP, they were very involved in Meka. But I think Editorial Manager were as well. I'm not sure about ScholarOne, so hopefully, they're all using Meka as well.
They
Yeah.
are. It's
Melissa,
across.
all three were involved heavily in the creation of Meka. It's a NISO standard, so it's actually all three were involved in that.
Rowan, do you want to talk at all about preprints and CurveNote, or we'll just nod and say, yes, that makes sense, and more information will come soon?
Yeah, I think both the formats themselves in terms of the Quarto and the MIST Markdown toolchains are very good at creating standardized data products coming out of that. And those are increasingly standardized. And I think over sort of the thrust that AGU has done, ensuring that that's done by multiple tools and community-based driven development, adhering to existing community-based standards, all of that is raising the bar of what could be possible from preprint servers of not hosting PDF documents, but expanding into new ways of showcasing this. And everything that I showed today in terms of the demo is community-based tools as well. So,
can you expand on that a little bit more? You and I've talked about the importance that this solution be not only community-based, that was critical, but also that as it evolves, as we learn more about scaling, as we learn more about working with other publishers, that there's the openness that's available throughout the workflow. Then, you know, being able to take a look at the computational notebooks, the skill sets that are going to be needed. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Do you want me to just throw one ball at you?
yeah, please throw
others?
a ball. I got distracted by a chat question halfway through. So.
Yeah, they're good ones. I'll tell you what, if I haven't gotten to your question, why don't you go ahead and start putting your hands up? You can ask Rowan directly, because I've lost track of the chat at this point. So I just be going backwards. But I think it's important for the folks on the call to know about the goals around, I'm not sure transparency is quite the right word, but the openness that you're building into the pipeline with the notebooks.
Yeah, there's so the CurveNote experience that we showcased today is built on top of the MIST Markdown toolset, which is coming out of the Executable Books project, which stewards tools like MIST Markdown and executable books. And that is something that is a community-driven project and has a lot of stakeholders in that space. There's over 12,000 Jupyter books that have been openly created. It's about 12% of the Python-based ecosystem at this stage in terms of the tool set that's running. And so this is something that's getting wide adoption in that space and is starting to get built out even more as a community project. Maybe I'll kick it over to Fernando, who's also
it's so
heavily
good
involved in that.
Thank you so much for being here. This is wonderful.
No, this is incredibly exciting. Thank you, Shelley. I'm sorry I couldn't be here for the first 30 minutes, so I just caught the tail end of Rowan's presentation. But first, congrats, Rowan and Shelley and Brian and the entire AGU team. This feels like 20 years of work. We're finally there. Like, we have something, and you folks have done an absolutely spectacular job. I've pestered Rowan, and my time is very split between a lot of things, so I don't get to write code as much anymore, but I do for the last year and a half, I've been behind the scenes pestering Rowan all the time on Slack for these things. And I wanted to comment a little bit on these questions that are really legitimate about the role of the community. There's been questions about the commercial role of CurveNote. Obviously, I will let Rowan and his team speak to that. But I've engaged with them a lot from the perspective of the community, of the Jupyter community. MIST was a project that was originally started here at Berkeley. We made the first private repo. The name was a mock-up between Markdown and restructured text. It is very much a community project. And I want to kind of say a few things about that. Is that, so first of all, purely administratively, MIST is not yet an official Jupyter project in the sense that it is part of the Jupyter book community, but it hasn't been officially tagged. Jupyter now has a more formal governance process. We are working with Rowan, with Chris Holdgreth, we should walk through this door in a few minutes, precisely on doing that in the next few weeks, on engaging the process to make it kind of a formal project. And because it is very much something that the Jupyter community, I think, wants, and we will go through the public process for that, it means it's also open to everyone's feedback. And I want to say that also as an invitation to those of you who have different needs, who have different features. It is by no means a finished deal. Mist is still evolving. And importantly, what we're trying to do, and one of the reasons I'm so excited is because we're thinking about Mist as something that unifies the experience of the scientists while they are working in Jupyter Lab, and Rowan and team have done a lot of work in making the interactive experience while you are computing, while you are authoring, while you are running your code, making your plots, analyzing your data, match the experience that the reader has when they view that document, which is hosted now as an interactive HTML. Some things may not be there. You may not have the full supercomputer behind it, but in as much as possible to unify that experience, there's an architecture that supports that, and it's evolving. And so please come to us with your needs, with your ideas, with specific use cases. And some of it is still challenging. We recognize some of these questions about allocation of large compute resources for reproducibility. Those are hard questions, but to the extent possible, the architecture is being driven very much by a community process. As I said, I have no stake, no commercial stake in Rowan's work. I have no concerns personally, because I feel that what we're doing is creating an infrastructure where, as a scientist, the authoring workflow and the creation workflow is open and supported by open infrastructure that I, as a scientist, feel that my university press could host, my library could support, community projects like SciPy that Rowan mentioned, or thinking of adopting it for producing community conference proceedings, that kind of thing, while recognizing that there is a role for industry in this, right? Jupyter is not an anti-commercial project, and Jupyter has received a lot of Jupyter Lab has been made possible because industry has contributed, and we need that. And so I think what we want is to recognize what is the role of industry where there are services that really require industrial support, right? There are things that require a job where somebody is there doing it day in, day out, and that is a job that, and what is the role of the community, and how do we build something that is consistent with the needs of the industrial players and the long-term needs of the community and openness. And I feel that in this process, CurveNote has been a very legitimate and positive partner. And this is a process that is driven by all of us. And so this is being done in the open. The code is on GitHub. Please participate. If you realize that something is counter to your needs, please bring it up. And I'm sure that we will engage, in trying to put Mist in the context of official Jupyter is actually strengthening that. And that's a process that we're literally working on in the next few weeks. So again, I don't want to monopolize the conversation. Congrats and thank you so much. I've been preaching this to everyone who will listen and giving talks and demos. I think it would be great to have a small shareable packet that we can now start reusing to blast away, share with our libraries. I'm on the campus library committee. We have an open science librarian at Berkeley, and I wanna really share this. And also for those of us who wear more than one scientific hat, I think it's time to start talking to the other scientific publishing scientific communities, SciAm, APS in particular, JB Paulina's here, Society for Neuroscience, and HBM, the kind of neuroimaging and neuroscience communities. There's a number of scientific publishing communities that will be interested in this, and having an easy to share byte package to give them, maybe a recording of Rowan's demo today, plus an easy to share PDF or something will ease that. So again, thanks everyone. And on the Jupyter side, if there's questions, I'm happy to answer them to the extent I can.
My heart just is so warm here. This could not have happened except for the fact that Fernando could already see it, JJ Allaire could already see it, and we were silly old AGU just trying to figure out how to do something cool. And they're like, oh, this is gonna work. And they were patient. There were a number of people at our first workshop that didn't even know what a computational notebook was. And I do make, humorous jokes that when Fernando and JJ participated and we had our publisher friends participate, that the Venn diagram of information was so small, and we all had to learn something. And it is this community that saw the value and helped us all understand and move along. And it will be this community that makes it valuable on the other side. These things Fernando just said. Yes, the package, of course, I just wrote it down. Sorry, my puppy's here. So yes, fantastic. Anybody else have a question they want to ask? there-
I'm going to be brave. I've got a really stupid question. So, Shelley, you and I, we've spent a lot of time, as a lot of people probably on this call have done, trying to get data citation, get, reuse of data and all that kind of stuff really embedded in the workflows. What I'm curious about is presumably there are large data sets that people will be using and working on that won't be part of the computational package. And how does that interact? Are they cited? Are they pulled in? Because obviously it's a completely different world to the XML and PDF. So it's like, are they called in? How does that work? And how will we still maintain, these other databases where this content is and stuff like that? I'm seeing nodding, so I hope I'm making sense.
You are, and I have a dog barking issue, which I'm sure is all going to be super annoying. So let's see if no, he's not going to calm down. So we still have those concerns. There's licensing, which has to be. Rowan, do you want to take the question?
Or Shelley, can I?
Oh, Brooks, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Melissa, thanks. Yeah, we thought a lot about that. And I can also address a little bit on the licensing questions. We had some good conversations with Creative Commons on how to, because notebooks contain text, data, and code, and all should be under appropriate licensing for the various parts. So first on the data, yes, the goal, there's some further instructions in the author instructions that are now up on the CurveNotes site and in the templates. But yes, the goal is still absolutely to support data citations and software citations for large software that's not included within the notebook, or that can't be included in the notebook, or might be included in other notebooks that are embedded within the published notebook, all of which is possible. In addition, abstractions of the data, summary tables could be in the notebook and be used to generate figures and aspects like that. One advantage of the notebook environment is it can also include the code that's used to access the databases and the data in the databases, as a way of both increasing transparency, greatly facilitating reuse, because someone then doesn't have to completely reinvent that code. But the instructions are definitely to support data citations. We want, the repositories need that. They're providing curation. They're the experts for the curation of the data. So all of that is supported, and that's the best practice that's supported through that. Our summary with Creative Commons was not to create a new notebook license or anything like that, but use existing licenses so that the notebook template specifies a license for the text and static figures, a separate license for the data, and a separate license for the software. If there are particular licenses, if there's someone reusing software that's under a certain license, or there are specific requirements for a separate license for a particular data set, those can be embedded in those particular parts of the notebook. So it's a very flexible environment for, there could be in general, all the data in this notebook, except as indicated, is under a CC0 license, and then if particular data sets require some other license or some other access, that can be indicated. And same for software. Again, there's a variety of open software licenses, and certain ones of those require maintaining that license or other reference to that license if that software is reused and things like that. So again, we're trying to support a multiple situations, but definitely we want the leading practices for data citations to be maintained and for repositories to be supported. Dumping data in notebooks without curation is just as bad as dumping it into supplemental information without curation.
Fernando, go ahead.
And forgive me if this was already mentioned, but I think a quick suggestion that I had, because of something that came up actually with a student of mine a few days ago, is maybe a little community produced little sheet of tips and tricks for successful authoring during the research process that will lead to better computational notebooks as products. For example, on this question of re-execution and whatnot, I was reviewing a student's thesis and I basically asked her, how many of those figures are you making in the middle of the computational code versus having computational code that produces a bunch of intermediate data tables that you save, and so that the plotting code then loads those and runs very quickly, because she's going to have to change fonts for like 200 figures. And that's going to, if the plotting is embedded with computation, it's going to take her a month to rerun that versus an hour. Things like that are things that people don't think about, and they completely change the picture of what the experience of potentially re-executing, updating, making reproducible, like, and those are things that a lot of people, even well-practiced scientists, do not think about. This is just one example, but I can imagine putting together one of these sort of like 10 simple rules. I mean, we actually did write a 10 simple rules paper on reproducible notebooks a while back, but maybe updating something like that with, now that we have this concrete example of an operational workflow, and it could be like, you're about to submit this. One of the first things you see is these little tips and tricks and ideas, especially as you embark on the process, because some of these things, if you do them at the very end, they're painful. If you adopt them as a good practice at the beginning, they don't add any particular hard work. It's just a change of habit and a change of practice. So just a thought for you, for all of us, not for you guys to do it. This is for all of us that we can do.
That makes perfect sense. And so, you know, I know enough about notebooks to do a project like this, but I don't know enough to write something like that. And one of the things that we were truly hoping on for this project is that these brilliant ideas would come through, and then the papers would be more enriched as we were getting the best guidance from our notebook friends. There was a conversation, I shared this with Rowan, that Brian and I had with someone who's interested to adopt this. Brian, I think it was HHMI, so the Howard Hughes folks. And their comment was, well, I mean, if you're just taking a flat paper and turning it into a notebook, you didn't do anything. And we're like, we know, except we have to have our researchers think differently about how their research is actually depicted. So, you know, not only 10 maybe efficiency tricks, but also 10 visualization tricks for how to do it. So yeah, so all of you notebook folks, yes, please. We can organize that. So thank you. Melissa, go ahead.
Sorry, I have another question, and it's kind of more from the publishing side and versioning. So obviously with notebooks, it's easier to version them and potentially kind of do new versions, but also you have the PDF and the XML, and these are all slightly different. And I'm just remembering back to when eLife introduced executable notebook. It didn't really take off or whatever, but it was never addressed like, will they have different DOIs? Are they different conceptually? Are they different content-wise? Do you allow versioning to happen on them because it's much easier than it is in a traditional workflow? And I was just curious about whether any of those things had been thought about. It, you know, it's still very early days, but I was just really curious about that.
Brooks, I know you're gonna have to hop off in a second, but Brooks helped us navigate a challenge with our Wiley partner on what, and I think what you're saying, or maybe a version of what you're saying is, go ahead, Brooks.
So first, Melissa, we had a number of conversations with Crossref to make sure that we were following leading practices as well as where they're heading. So we considered actually a number of models that Crossref currently has, but we also wanted to know where kind of their thinking was evolving on things like relations and versions and so forth. So they recommended, and which we thought was great, kind of a single DOI for the entire package of the notebook plus the traditional article. That simplifies a whole number of things. One, it simplifies citation, because then you're citing the notebook. They're not two separate citations with two different things. That means two records to people's ORCIDs. That means you have to index them twice. So yes, a challenge is going to be keeping all those, you know, explaining to the reader the difference of what those versions are, and if one version is somewhat different because of copy editing or errata or things like that. So that is something we're working out. The challenges they're hosted on, the large publishers aren't ready to host notebooks fully. So that was something we had actually hoped to do when we started this project, but as it went through, that was clear that the large publishers, because of the complexity of their systems, aren't really ready to adapt an entirely new publishing model, and maybe you can appreciate that with what Eli went through with notebooks and things like that. But so the challenge is they're on two different platforms. So the goal is to have the DOI resolved to the notebook, but have clear backtracking for the reader to access the quote unquote traditional versions of the HTML and PDF if they want. That way they're still fully indexed in the article. We're starting with an existing journal and then existing journals rather than creating new journals, which also has a myriad of other complications. Let's see, where else were you thinking of? Oh, on the notebook version. So the model we have with CurveNote is that essentially the notebook is cloned or uploaded into the CurveNote space, but it isn't locked for reviewing and then locked at publication. So basically it's when it's published by AGU, it'll be under an AGU environment, hosted environment. And so AGU will control the revisions of those. Going forward, another thing that we had hoped at one point to do is actually do copy editing on the notebooks directly. I think that's a future workflow that some publishers will adopt as copy editors get skilled or hired for that purpose exactly. And that has a number of environments. The great thing about notebooks is that they are so richly structured and tagged that, again, CurveNote and Rowan and Steve can produce essentially good JATS XML from them. So it's very close to the supporting alternate workflows and things like that. So at this stage, we're not doing copy editing directly on the notebooks. And so one question we are still wrestling with is how to integrate some of that copy editing corrections back into that notebook version. But DOI, a single DOI supports multiple versions now. I mean, right now there's, usually publishers have an accepted version and then a copy edited version and then a paginated version. And then sometimes there's revision versions and things like that all under the same DOI. So again, that was conversations with Crossref and what they strongly recommended for both what they support now and where they see their models going forward. And it greatly simplifies the citation and elevates the notebook to exactly what this project was to do, which is the official scholarly publication.
Peer-reviewed scholarly publication.
Peer-reviewed, thank you. And it will be going through peer review as well. Yes, Shelley.
Yeah, thank you.
Mia, you had your hand up. I didn't want to miss that.
I did. Then I put it back down. I'm trying not to. I'm really excited about all of this. But I'm I'm the traditional publisher. Hello, everybody. I know we met. I think most of you at the working group. It's good to see you all again. I'm the director of publication operations for the journals. So all these topics are really exciting, and I've been partnering with Rowan and Brian and Shelley and everybody on getting to where we are now. And I'm noticing during this call, the enthusiasm, which is awesome, and I'm excited, and all this kind of future state aspirations, which is great. But I'm also recognizing that, some of the folks on the call that are more, I guess we agreed on legacy or traditional publishers have not chimed in here. And so I just want to, and in the spirit of this kind of openness and of the project is that the model that we built now from the journal operations perspective, it is boutique. And there is a lot of, we are working this out, right? Some of it. And I think the tech and infrastructure solutions are coming up as you've seen it and some of the demo, which is really exciting and what y'all have been talking about here. But there's a lot of things that still needs to be figured out. And this is going to matter into how accessible the solution at the end is going to be for different kinds of publishers. Melissa raised up EJP versus ScholarOne and EM. What about folks that aren't even using those? So those kinds of things. And we haven't talked about, really the editor role, the peer review. And I know this was working groups when we met last time. So, with this workflow that we have now, it is very much interrupted by this. And the goal is in the future to fully kind of embed it into the existing systems. But as we're going from face to face, it's like, we're working this out. So I think I raised this here so that, the publishers on this call are excited that this is doable because we are doing it, with one of our journals. Yes, it's more kind of handholdy and some intervention at the moment in terms of like the people component. Think about the journal staff who's looking at submission that has to do the different steps now. But we will share, what we ended up kind of that under the hood in terms of the peer review workflows as we go from face to face. I think we're just about to start L2 or, in the middle of it once we have submissions. And I think we'll share that information because I think that might be important as you bring it back to your, publishers, because, what we want is that a model that's adopted by different journals. So they're not, that not just the AGUs or the whatever journals can publish this type of, solution. So I don't know. Is that rambling? Yeah, it's probably rambling, but there it is. And I know, Doug, you have your hands up, so yeah. What do you?
But Douglas, before you get going, just to lift up what Mia just said. So imagine if we had the best possible L2 and L3 authors coming in, we would be trying to find a paper for each of the different scenarios that you're all concerned about in the chat, so that we can walk through with those authors what it looks like, how to deal with it. Is it is a computation on high performance computing system? How do we deal with that? Is it, all of the different scenarios? So please do make sure that you're in touch with Brian if you're interested in participating now for this first version or the next version. So we're working our way through the pipeline as Brian described, L2 and L3, what is it? Launch 2, launch 3, yes, launch away, and we'll get there. The neat thing is we've thought it through well enough that we know we'll get there. We just have to work the problem now. And the number of risks are actually very, I'm not going to say, I don't have any wood near me. I have some fake wood, but they're mostly known. I do know that we have some funder folks on the call, so I'm just going to say it out loud. We're actually funded for phase 2. We're actually hunting money down now. So if you've got an extra $100,000 laying around, just let me know because I could really use it to make sure that this all happens. Just saying. Douglas, go ahead.
Way to fundraise, Shelley. Well, my comments more coming from the user or the content consumer side. I know we had a side chat at AGU, but I think it would be worth bringing to the bigger group is that because a lot of discussion right now focused on the researchers who want to publish and also the publishers and how to do that. And two aspects. One is how do you measure the impacts on the from the user perspective, like who are reading those or using those as a way for another way to capturing the impact of this project. The other one is that the accessibility and all the things comes together with the who are going to read or use those notebooks in a way how I know it kind of like has been not maybe not directly included in the first phase, but like what's the plan for the next phase, maybe thinking about that specific topic.
Maybe I'll just give a quick comment on the impact on the reading experience. There's some user experience research that I follow in scientific publication that actually came out of Allen AI Institute that is looking at these sorts of interventions, especially around giving contextual information and cover references, and that speeds up the reading comprehension of a paper by 26% in their studies. And so I think these sorts of things that can be enabled by new ways of working that are very HTML first and very machine readable and data driven, that can have a profound impact on reading comprehension and speed of scientific papers. And so that I think is like where we can strive to on the reading side.
Go ahead, Simon.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back to a question that I had earlier on, and I think it comes back to this point that was just made. Like it does enhance reading comprehension for people, but I think Jupyter still really struggles with like ADA compliance level accessibility for a lot of its features. And that I guess, you know, I think journals, because of the way that web development works and because of the legal constraints of ADA compliance for web platforms, especially in the United States, you know, journals have been very proactive in terms of adding annotations and ARIA markup and stuff to figures and you know, and hyperlinks and things like that. And I really wonder, like, one, you know, I really think that if this is going to be something that AGU is going to pilot, it really becomes critical that we as a society push forward compliance with accessibility rules online. And I'm concerned that, you know, yeah, maybe there's greater usability for some of these papers, but there's much lower usability for people with sensory disabilities and things like that. And so I'm very much in support of this activity, but I think if it doesn't come with a concerted effort to highlight and maintain accessibility for the greater population, then I think, you know, it's potentially opening up like liability issues too, right? Like what happens if you get sued? So
Simon, I really appreciate you bringing it up. Honestly, I'm trying to remember back to the initial workshop. I'm not sure it was on our radar, but you're absolutely right. If we're actually looking at a format that can stand on its own without a partner PDF document, maybe not, it would need to stand on its own in that harsh light of accessibility. So, Fernando, I don't know if you have something on that
Well,
topic or new.
I just want to jump in because, you know, the current iteration of what we're doing will have the notebook with compute, but then there's basically the paper style article will still be there at the Wiley platform. And that will have the HTML version and the PDF version, and it will have everything that papers currently have over there. So that's not the ideal situation, because at some point we'd really like to just have the notebook as a notebook, and we've got all the long-term archiving and, you know, all those issues about does the compute functionality degrade over time worked out. But in this first iteration, really, we've got kind of two things happening at once. And I see I've probably said something inaccurate because we're
No, I want to just chime in before Fernando chimes in about the accessibility efforts in Jupyter, likely. Is that the MIST Markdown project, which is what the user interface is designed on, is trying to do its best in those areas. And again, it's a community-driven effort. And so those are things that many people from the community can get involved in improving the accessibility that will be brought in many places. And that is something that we've been taking a first-class approach towards accessibility. So those abbreviations, for example, that I was showing are using best-in-class web technologies today for supporting things like abbreviations and ARIA labels. And so that is separate from the Jupyter components, which are embedded in these. And that's a slightly different effort, which is tied directly to the improvements in the Jupyter ecosystem.
Perfect. So we're
I just wanted to add to that, and thank you, Simon, for posting that blog post, because that was one resource that I wanted to share, is that yes, we are aware that in Jupyter, things are not perfect by any means, but there is a lot of active work. As everything, we lack enough resources, we can use more help, but this is not something that we ignore. Berkeley is an institution where we teach with these tools to large numbers of students. We have pretty strict accessibility requirements from the ADA and the Department of Justice. So we do take this seriously. There's progress to be made, but the big step that was taken, and there was an important transition recently, is that the code base for Jupyter Lab, and this is a bit of a technical point, but it matters here. The code base for Jupyter Lab has a better foundation for accessibility, and the traditional Jupyter Notebook interface was migrated to this new code base last year. That is detailed in the blog post, but basically I just want to give the high level view is that today, as of today, which was not true a year or two ago, both Jupyter Lab and the Jupyter Notebook application are just two views on a common, more modern code base that has better support for accessibility and where accessibility issues have been taken as a first-class concern. It's not perfect, it's not complete, we have work to do, but it is not something that is being ignored. And that's complementary to the point Rowan was making, which is that when HTML exports are made by the MIST machinery, on that export, accessibility is also a concern. So from the interactive live experience in Jupyter Lab and Jupyter Notebook to the static exports that MIST produces, at least we are working on this. I'm not claiming perfection. It's a very complex topic and problem, but it is not being ignored, at least on the Jupyter side from across the spectrum. And we are at least on top of a better foundation today.
If I may continue on the thread, I think there's also the education component for the authors, how to design a notebook that's more accessible, just because there's this classic inaccessibility issues with how the author's making the figures, and that will persist into the notebooks if no proper education or the recommended practice, like Fernando already mentioned, maybe how to design notebook from the very beginning to think about those accessibility concerns that they may have.
So I got 3 things now for that tips and tricks. So efficiency, visualization, and accessibility. Yes.
Can I just note, I just want to signal boost something that, sorry, I'm Chris Holgraff. I work with
Hey, Chris.
Digital in this project as well. I was not here for the beginning of this meeting. I just came out of thin air. I just want to signal boost a point that Simon was making, which is that things like accessibility are precisely where you get a big benefit from organizational partners that care about this kind of thing and that have the interest and the resources to help make these kinds of improvements. Something like accessibility is really hard to achieve through just sort of like one-off individual contributors that are kind of making like small contributions, scratching their own itch out there. Things like organizations like AGU, like Berkeley, those are the sorts of entities that tends to care at a strategic level about accessibility. And so I think that those are opportunities to like invest in these open source communities and kind of create some of these improvements that we all want to see, and are kind of always trying to find new ways to either, you know, encourage or fund or anything like that. So I just want to like signal boost, yes, like this is a problem that is ongoing and that would really benefit from external collaboration and participation on.
Thank you. I'm foot stomping. I'm signal boosting myself. So this is great. Yes. We have a responsibility. So yes. All right. Brian, do you want me to hand it back over to you? Make sure everybody has all the links and the next steps and how they can stay engaged and such.
Absolutely. So yeah, and we're down to 3 minutes. So I just wanted to thank everyone for joining today and for this conversation. It was really great to be a part of this and hear the excitement, and still that we have plenty of challenges yet to solve. So please do reach out if you, we will communicate through Slack. We will send out email updates as we go through L2, L3, and then on to L4. We will do, I'm sure we'll do another one of these this year again to update everyone on progress. So yeah, I just want to end with that to say thank you and let us know what you need. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.